Hello, I'm Natasha Hussein, and this is Newsfeed, your dose of what people are talking about online. Israel has admitted that its forces violated protocol by strapping a wounded Palestinian man onto an army jeep in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. The incident went viral over the weekend with growing outrage over the mistreatment of Mujahid Azmi, who was injured during an exchange of gunfire. Israeli forces claim Azmi was what they call a terrorist suspect who was arrested during a raid. Eyewitnesses and the Palestine Red Crescent say Israeli troops prevented medics from providing first aid or transporting Azmi to a hospital.
We got him outside, and for about an hour or half an hour, we kept asking for an ambulance. Then we called one. 15 minutes later, 2 jeeps came, and they got in here. The troops told us to turn around and not look, and they put Mujahid on the jeep's hood and took him.
Azmi was later transferred to the Red Crescent, which reported that his gunshot wound was not life-threatening. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, condemned the incident, calling it an example of the military using Palestinian civilians as human shields. Israeli forces said the incident would be investigated and dealt with accordingly. But, as you may also know, the Israeli military has a history of inadequately investigating itself and failing to hold members accountable for unethical behavior. Meanwhile, in his first Israeli TV interview since the war began, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the intense phase of fighting in Rafah, southern Gaza, is nearly over. But that doesn't mean Israel's war is ending. Netanyahu says the fight will go on until Hamas is completely eliminated. He also shot down the idea of the Palestinian Authority, based in the West Bank, running Gaza instead of Hamas.
If there is an agreement, it will be an agreement according to our terms, and our terms are not to end the war, to leave Gaza and leave Hamas as it is. I refuse to leave Hamas as it is. We need to eliminate it. I'm not ready to establish a Palestinian state there. I'm not ready to hand it over to the Palestinian Authority. I'm not ready to do that.
Netanyahu adds that once the heavy fighting in Gaza winds down, Israel will shift more troops to the northern border with Lebanon, where fighting with Iran-backed Hezbollah is heating up. The recent spike in cross-border attacks has raised fears of another full-scale conflict in the Middle East and increased international pressure on the prime minister. Netanyahu is also facing widespread opposition within Israel. Tens of thousands of Israelis have been protesting against Netanyahu's handling of the nearly 9-month-long war, calling for fresh elections and the release of captives held in Gaza.
We want a new election. We want a government that works for the people, that is trying to bring the hostages back and to find a conclusion to this war against Hamas.
We know that the only way to return the hostages and to start the healing process of this country is to eliminate this racist, messianic, corrupted government that chooses all the time, that chooses their survival over the hostages' survival. So every day counts here, and the way we do it, we're using unviolent protest everywhere we can, in the streets, in the cities, next to the houses, in order to make sure that this government ceases to exist as soon as possible.
Protests have also hit India over a growing scandal that's tainted the integrity of crucial university entrance exams and left the future of more than 3 million students hanging in the balance. At the last minute on Sunday, the Indian government cancelled a postgraduate exam for medicine amid allegations of leaks, corruption, and cheating. Students reacted with disbelief and outrage.
The circular for postponement was released 15 minutes ago. That means it was less than 12 hours before the actual paper was supposed to be conducted. Are the people in the Ministry of Education even eligible to take such decisions? Are they even eligible to be in that position of power and change and make policies that will ruin people's lives like this? You're trying to protect the integrity and the sanctity of the examination. Seriously? By stopping it 12 hours before the paper, what did you do when you were releasing the admit cards? The NEET UG controversy was going on even then. These are doctors. These are not small kids. They're writing an exam to stay in this very country that you are ruining with your policies.
Just a day earlier, on Saturday, the head of the National Testing Agency was sacked over the scandal, which saw the recent cancellation of other major exams, including the undergraduate entrance exam for medicine. 2.4 million people in 300 cities had sat for the 4-hour exam during a sweltering heat wave. But the results were canceled as many candidates had suspiciously high scores. Some students reported being cold called by touts demanding up to $35,000 for question papers just hours before the exam. The Education Ministry later admitted the questions were leaked on Telegram and the dark web. Several arrests have been carried out, and the government has promised a rigorous probe. But impacted students say their future is now on hold, and the timing couldn't be worse amid high unemployment. Another controversy in India is the government's plan to prosecute author Aruna Roy over comments she made about Kashmir in 2010. More than 200 Indian academics, activists, and journalists have published an open letter urging the government to withdraw its recent decision to prosecute Roy under the country's controversial anti-terrorism law. A top Delhi official recently gave cops the go-ahead for the legal action against Roy, whose novel The God of Small Things won the Booker Prize in 1997. She'll be prosecuted together with university professor Sheikh Shaukat Hussain for discussing the disputed region of Kashmir's relationship with India at a seminar more than a decade ago. In speeches, ruling BJP officials claim were provocative. Roy is one of India's most famous authors, but her activism and outspoken criticism of Narendra Modi's right-wing government, including over laws targeting minorities, have made her a polarizing figure in India. Many, though, have come out in support of the author, saying under the Constitution, she has a right to voice her opinions freely. Several U.S. states are considering imposing bans on smartphones in schools. The governors of California and New York are working to draft laws controlling the use of phones. Indiana has already passed a law which comes into effect in July. The use of smartphones and their impact on mental health is a hot topic in America. The country's top health professional wants the government to pass laws compelling social media firms to slap warning labels on apps. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy says users need to be alerted of the potential harm such platforms pose to adolescents' mental health. He says policymakers need to tackle social media companies the same way they regulated car seats, baby formula, medication, and other products for children. Andy is in Washington, D.C. and gives us a lowdown on how things are playing out.
The U.S. Surgeon General's call on Congress to slap a warning label on social media is getting mixed reaction on social media. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says that right now, parents are overwhelmed with trying to keep their kids away from harmful content and bullying on social media.
Not only have companies not demonstrated that their platforms are safe for kids, but there's growing evidence of harm. It shows us, in fact, that when adolescents spend more than 3 hours a day on social media, we're seeing an association with a doubling of risk of anxiety and depression symptoms, and the average amount of use per day among adolescents is nearly 5 hours. So that's deeply concerning to me, not just as Surgeon General, but as a parent myself. Now, a warning label would help parents to understand these risks. Many parents don't know that those risks exist, and we have data from tobacco warning labels that in fact tells us that they can be helpful in changing awareness and changing behavior.
Social media companies are really lobbying hard against any warning label, saying that it would be just the start of government censorship and saying that they can police their own content. Well, Murthy says they haven't been doing a very good job of that, and he says that right now a kid on social media is like a kid in a car with no speed limits or traffic lights. On social media, critics of the warning label are really decrying the nanny state. That's the idea that the government has too much of a role in ordinary people's lives. One person writing, "Have we become so lazy that we now need the Surgeon General to raise our kids?" Another one saying the warning would be pointless and counterproductive. It would create warning fatigue and further the tribal divide in America. But a lot more people on social media sounded very positive towards the idea of a warning label. One writing that people have become addicted to and manipulated by social media, and it can be unhealthy. when you consider that several months ago, Congress invited the heads of all the social media companies to Capitol Hill for some very contentious hearings about the contents that they deliver to kids on social media, really giving those CEOs a grilling. Well, makes you think that a warning label might not be that far-fetched.
All right, speaking of social media, you may have seen this on your feed over the weekend. It's one image that I certainly had a hard time shaking off. Everyone kept sharing it. That's right, it's Tay-Tay and the British royal family. Turning 42 over the weekend was enough reason for Prince William to show off his London boy moves at the Eras tour at Wembley Stadium. This was at Taylor Swift's third sold-out show in London. The British capital is hosting 8 of her concerts, more than any other city in the world, much to the delight of Swifties.
Good vibes, like even just getting the tube here, like people were like saying have a nice time, and you could tell that like everyone's like just really nice to each other, and I think that's what I think makes it a difference with a concert. It feels like there is a community, I guess.
Everyone's just so accepting and they're just loving the love for everyone, and there's no bad vibes.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got bracelets. We spent a few nights doing these, so we've all got loads to trade. And yeah, it's just a super fun experience to do together.
Her latest gigs in London attracted nearly 700,000 fans. That's crazy. Other notable celebrities in attendance at her shows besides the royals included Bridgerton star Nicola Coughlan and actress Leslie Mann. According to the mayor of London, Taylor's shows injected roughly $380 million into London's economy in a span of just 3 days. Crazy. Well, despite bringing in the big bucks, not everyone is happy with so-called Swiftonomics. That refers to the economic influence of the pop icon. Last week, 2 climate activists from Just Stop Oil cut through the fence at a London airport and spray-painted her private jet orange. They accused her of fueling the climate crisis by being one of the celebrities with the highest private jet carbon emissions. Well, it's a different story for British rock band Coldplay. You may remember at the beginning of this month, we spoke about their tour, which had a massive impact in the fight against the climate crisis. The British band had announced they'd cut their carbon footprint by more than half after 2 years of touring. Now they've gone all out and are looking to make the world's first eco-friendly album. Titled Moon Music, their new album is set to be released in October. Each vinyl copy will be pressed onto discs made from recycled plastic bottles. A special notebook edition will be comprised of 70% of plastic collected during a river cleanup in Guatemala. The group says this will reduce carbon emissions by 85% and prevent the manufacture of more than 25 tons of virgin plastic. When it comes to style and fashion, Paris is where it all happens. And the City of Light did not disappoint when Vogue magazine transformed the historic Place Vendôme into a catwalk for its annual fashion extravaganza. It was a star-studded affair celebrating 100 years of French fashion. With a month until the city hosts the 2024 Olympic Games, each decade from the 1920s onwards was dedicated to a specific sport. Serena Williams showed off a custom-made off-white ensemble in the tennis segment. Draped in Hermes, Kendall Jenner and Gigi Hadid rode across the square on horseback, and more than 150 models and about 200 athletes graced the catwalk. The fashion was, as the French would say, magnifique. If you missed it, we've got you covered. We'll leave you with some highlights from the show.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Si это чувство ты добром, нам когда муды
When love comes in and takes you for a spin, oh la la la, c'est magnifique. When every night your loved one holds you tight, oh la la la, c'est magnifique.